Country Director Diop, thank you very much for joining me, and Regional Director of World Bank, thank you very much for joining me. Mr. Diop, let me begin with you because you are Country Director of World Bank to Thailand. Can we say that since COVID-19, this is the time that Thailand economy is really recovering?
Yes, what we are seeing is that economic activity is picking up, supported by private consumption and a recovery, gradual recovery in tourism. Now, it's important to step back and then look at how Thailand managed to really get out of the COVID situation, because growth was hit by COVID in all countries, activities were stopped, and fiscal policy, and since the report we are launching today is really on fiscal policy, I think it's important to really highlight what fiscal policy has done to support the economy, to support household, and to really allow the country to really gradually get back to normal economic activities. Remember, before COVID, Thailand had implemented very prudent fiscal policy, which allowed it to have a very low debt to GDP. So it could ramp up actually expenditure, and since there were no revenue coming because economic activities were literally stopped, Thailand could increase its debt level to be able to support the economy and to support household.
Let's look back before we look forward. You just mentioned that we should review what Thailand did, what did Thailand manage during COVID-19. Can you tell me what did Thailand do right during that time?
So I think what Thailand did right during that time was to step up and support the economy. Because the private sector could not spend that much, household could not spend that much because activities were literally suddenly stopped. So fiscal policy, the budget, has really stepped in to really support the economy and to support household. Now, you will tell me that all economies in the world did the same. Now, the difference we see in Thailand is that Thailand has been very effective in doing that because they accumulated fiscal space before COVID because of prudent fiscal management, and they were very effective as well. And the support to household was also very substantial. It was among the largest actually in the region, and that has reduced the extent to which poverty has increased during COVID. In many countries in the region, COVID has led to a very significant increase in poverty. In Thailand, the numbers show that this income support, which was very large, has really prevented poverty to increase that much or as much as elsewhere.
Mr. Zaman, because you are in charge of equitable growth and finance institutions, are you also think that Thailand was on the right track during COVID-19?
Yeah, I completely agree with my colleague Ndiame Diop on this front. I think, and we have done actually comparative analysis of how different countries fared during COVID. So as Ndiame mentioned, the Thai government spent one of the largest amounts in terms of shares of GDP on COVID response. But they did it in two very good ways. One, it was fiscally generally prudent because overall debt levels were quite low. And secondly, the targeting was much better than in other countries. So the targeting of households made sure that the impact on poverty was less than in other countries, whereas other countries were not able to use some of the technologies that you have in place and tools that you have in place to be able to reach the vulnerable households. So the administrative systems that you have, many countries in the neighborhood do not. And so in that respect, you're able to use it, and so we consider it an effective response relative to others. Yes.
But currently, to look forward for Thailand, for the direction of the countries, because Thailand has so many aims, especially to lift up to higher income economy. But what should Thailand do more in order to promote inclusion and to promote equitable growth?
Sure. So first of all, you have aspirations to become high income by about 2037, I understand is your target. For that, Thailand will need to grow at around 5 to 5.5% to be able to reach that target. Right now, you're growing at about 3.5%.
We have to do a lot more.
You will have to, you will have to do more. So how can you do more is the question. And how do you make sure that the growth that you are going to have is not only enjoyed by the super rich, but is actually shared amongst the population as a whole? Those are the challenges that the country has. So what are some of those things? First, if you look at longer term growth, Thailand basically needs to improve its productivity levels, right? It will need to invest in its people, in its skill levels, as well as invest in more cutting edge technology and research and development, etc., and become similar to Korea in terms of, and that's another country that we cover, in its research and development type capacity to be able to increase its productivity levels and get growth high. It also has to have certain reforms which can be done more immediately, like make the economy more open to services, to trade in services, for example. There are a lot of restrictions. It's the second most restrictive country in the region on services trade, for example. You'll need to improve domestic competition as well. So, so those are some of the elements that are important for the structural reform agenda, and improve public investment as well. So, for example, if you are to get to that level, there are a lot of climate shocks that Thailand faces, a lot of floods, etc. You'll need to build those sort of adaptation infrastructure necessary so that the economy can grow further, right?
What about your take? What's your recommendation for Thailand?
I fully agree with what Hassan just said. One big challenge is growth, how much you grow, because Thailand right now is growing below the level that is required to reach these targets of being a high-income economy by 2037. So there's a whole reform agenda there to push growth, which is really important. And that agenda is all the more challenging that the population is aging gradually. And when you have that, you do have some headwinds for growth, right? So, so Thailand should redouble the effort, should do more than normal to be able to grow at 5.5%. And all the things that Hassan mentioned are really important to grow fast. I would really just re-emphasize one factor that he mentioned, which is investment in infrastructure and public investment in general, because public investment as a share of GDP is lower than the level of income of Thailand. If you remember, when Thailand went from low income to upper middle income country within a generation, which is a spectacular economic transformation, Thailand's investment as a share of GDP was around above 25% of GDP. It was very high. Now it's low, it's below 20. And it's very hard to grow fast when your level of investment, total investment, public and private, is this low. So really big effort to increase investment, upskilling the labor force, reskilling the labor force, combining it with innovation in order to really increase the productivity of the economy. That could help Thailand grow faster.
People are very much aware and are very concerned with economic policy, reform policy, the direction that Thailand should take. So let's say that you are advisor to the new government. What the policy that you like Thailand to keep pushing or move forward?
Right now, just after COVID, and we are barely exiting from COVID, many of the general population are feeling pinch in their welfare. Right? They're feeling the impact of high inflation, food inflation, some hardships, some have lost their jobs, and so on. So I think it's really important to focus on that. Now, how do you do that in a way that doesn't undermine your potential, your capacity to grow the economy? And here I would say fiscal policy has a very important role to play to really support those that need it the most in society. But for that, you need to really better target perhaps your social assistance to people. And at the same time, you really need to also manage to grow the economy, because that would help increase the opportunities in the economy. But most of all, setting a very clear direction will help private sector to come in, because one of the enemy of private investment is uncertainty. So really very rapidly, as a new government, communicating very clearly about the direction of travel, that in itself can really crowd in private investment, which will help job creation and will help the recovery of the economy in general.
What's your assessment of sentiment from other countries when looking at Thailand at this very moment? In terms of political stability, what's the atmosphere in general?
No, I think the recent elections in Thailand really is a momentous time for Thailand, and we're all hoping that this will really help Thailand to really embark in a period of political stability that will be very important to support the country, because Thailand is a very capable, it's a very, as Hassan mentioned, capacity of implementation. That's very true. Here you really have everything you need. You have very smart people, a very strong private sector, and an entrepreneurial society, and a digitally savvy young population. With political stability, I see Thailand just growing very fast. Imagine if you have just political stability, I think this country will be very competitive as long as those reforms that we mentioned earlier are implemented.
What about you, Mr. Hassan? To look at Thailand as an outsider, what's the major factor that hold Thailand back?
You have some highly competitive firms which are exporting globally. You have, a company which has one of the largest shares of the tuna market, for example, agro-processing, whether it's automotives, etc. You have certain segments. So then building on those segments, for example, in automotives, moving into the EV space aggressively, I think would be an important strategic direction. And in fact, we have provided some sort of reports, etc., on specific sectors that could, in fact, where Thailand has a comparative advantage in the value chain, and we can continue to provide that kind of technical advice to the government as to what are some of the incentives, etc., that can be provided for those sectors to grow and to create jobs, right? So that's kind of, I would say, sort of in building on Thailand's advantages. Secondly, I would say is one needs to keep in mind that the country is aging faster than other countries in the world, in the region. So right now, about 20% of the population is above 60 years old. In about 20 years' time, it will be about 35% of the population, right? So one has to have a realistic view. What is Thailand going to look like in 20 years' time in terms of a society, in terms of its people? And how can one then build upon that setup? Because you can't reverse aging, right? You can, in order to be able to take advantage. So there, I would say it will have to move into much more digitally skilled type of Thailand, more of a Korea type of an economic model. But moving into high value services. So not low value services, but high value services, building on IT skills, digital skills, etc. And you will need to also, as a result, because of the population demographics, you will need to import foreign professionals to help you do that. And that's why when I mentioned at the beginning, your services restrictions are amongst the highest in the world. Well, you've got neighboring countries which have opened up those professions. In Malaysia, the education sector. In the Philippines, the ICT sector. And I think Thailand will need to do that as well in order to be able to basically mirror what the country will look like and match the economic policies to be able to have a high value serviced economy.
Currently, one of the structural weaknesses of the Thailand economy is this high dependence on tourism. It is really critical to improve the competitiveness in manufacturing and agriculture so that you reduce that dependence on tourism. And we've seen that Thailand was hardly hit by COVID because of tourism and the sensitivity of that sector to that type of shocks. And in general, tourism is also lower value added sector than some of the sort of higher value added sector in manufacturing, where Thailand really needs to go, given the aging population and so on in order to increase the productivity and growth and the income of people in general.
What are the areas that do you think Thailand should focus in terms of industry or policy reforms?
The whole service sector can be expanded if you open it up for more competition, for example, right? Of course, there's a political economy that is difficult in every country, but if you manage to do that as a society, it will just expand the scope of economic activities and job creation for the population. So, in fact, foreign direct investment comes with a lot of benefits. In fact, it comes with, technology, know-how, etc., and complementarity with domestic investors. Of course, government has to really anticipate on that and make sure that foreign direct investment benefits the local economy. And that's something that can be done through good public policy. But in general, improving competition, upskilling the labor force, reskilling the labor force, adapting to new technology, because the world is changing very, very fast. So you have to be very agile, and the education system has to be very responsive to the opportunities and challenges that we are seeing in the economy. And I think this is another area of challenge for Thailand.
Have you also mentioned that the country that Thailand can learn from is South Korea?
I think there are several countries, but of course, Thailand has an aspiration to become high income, right? So it'll always look at its high income peers, and South Korea is in the neighborhood. It is now high income, right? And so in that, and it went from low income in 1950s all the way to high income in 50 years, right? That's actually a record speed, right? Now, how did it do that? Stable political direction, very key, and therefore very relevant for Thailand, to set an economic vision that everybody follows and sustains even to the medium term. The macro stability part, which I think broadly Thailand has. Focus on export-led growth. Incentives to the private sector in order to support that as well, right? And big investments in research and development spending. But initially the government provided that support, and then the private sector, the large Korean, I don't want to mention the names, but the large Korean firms, in total now spend 3% of GDP on R&D, the government only 1%, but a total of 4% of expenditure on R&D, on research and development. Initially, like 20 years ago, it was the other way around. The government spent the bulk of the money on R&D. Thailand is on that phase where it can make that transition from heavy government investment to more private sector induced investment in R&D to help this upskilling of the economy. So those are some of the lessons from Korea.
What would happen if Thailand cannot do from what you have recommended?
Unfortunately, there's a cost of not doing the reform that you have to do, right? And the cost could manifest itself in, rising poverty. And in fact, we've seen that in Thailand. We've seen some, not huge, but some increase in poverty. And for a country like Thailand that has the capacity to really just raise to the high income economy in not so long. I mean, the horizon we're talking about is really maybe 15 years or so. It's a pity, actually. But, you know, realizing those objectives will require reform. Frankly, there's no secret. The difference between countries that do well and those that don't generally is reform.
Thank you very much for both of you for food for thought for Thailand in terms of pushing forward economic policy and reform policy. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Diop
Thank
and
you.
Mr.
Thank you very
Zaman
much.
for joining
Yeah.
me.
Thank
ขอบ
you.
คุณค่ะ
Yeah.